Today, I've got some exciting space news to share with you. Have you ever wondered what happens when astronauts are up in space and things don't go exactly as planned? Well, that's what is happening right now with two astronauts, Sunita Williams and Wilmore, on the International Space Station. NASA has decided it's a little too risky to bring them back home right away. So they have been staying up there a bit longer. Today, I will tell you all about who Sunita Williams is, how they are getting back to Earth, and how SpaceX is stepping in to help out. Hi everyone, this is Daphne Huxley for B News. Subscribe our channel to encourage us, like and follow our channel to get notifications of interesting news and updates. Let's first see what International Space Station ISS is. The International Space Station ISS is like a giant science laboratory floating high above Earth in space. It is one of the biggest human made objects ever built and can be seen from Earth with the naked eye. You can use a free app like ISS Detector to find out when the ISS will pass over your location. You can also sign up for a NASA service to receive notifications when the ISS will be visible. The ISS is not just a single building but a collection of connected rooms or modules that were put together piece by piece in space. Who built the ISS? The ISS was built by the combined efforts of five different space agencies from around the world. NASA from the United States, Roscosmos from Russia, ESA from Europe, JAXA from Japan, CSA from Canada. The idea behind the ISS was to create a place where scientists could live and work in space for long periods of time, conducting experiments that can only be done in a low gravity environment. How is the ISS structured? The ISS is divided into two main parts. Firstly, the Russian Orbital Segment ROS. This section was built by Russia and contains living quarters, science labs, and systems to keep the ISS functioning. Secondly, the US Orbital Segment USOS. This part was assembled by NASA with help from Japan, Europe, and Canada. It also has laboratories, living areas, and other equipment needed for experiments and daily life in space. When did it all start? The first piece of the ISS was launched into space in 1998. Since then, more pieces were added, and astronauts have been living and working on the ISS continuously since November 2000. That's over 23 years of people living in space without a break. How do astronauts get to the ISS? Astronauts travel to the ISS on spacecraft that dock or attach to the station at special ports. Docking specifically refers to joining of two separate free-flying space vehicles. There are 8 of these docking ports on the ISS. The Russian Soyuz spacecraft is often used to bring astronauts to the ISS. Other robotic spacecraft deliver supplies like food, water, and equipments needed for the experiments. What do astronauts do on the ISS? The main job of the astronauts on the ISS is to conduct experiments in a special environment where there is very little gravity, known as microgravity. They study things like how plants grow in space, how human bodies change without gravity, and how materials behave in this unique setting. These experiments help us learn more about space and how to live in it, which will be important for future missions to the moon, Mars, and beyond. What's next for the ISS? The ISS will continue to operate until at least the end of 2030. By that time, new modules like the Axiom orbital segment will be added to it. After 2030, the ISS is planned to be safely brought back down to Earth and decommissioned, meaning it will no longer be used. The fact is, as of March 2024, 279 people from 22 different countries have visited the ISS. The ISS orbits Earth at a speed of about 28,000 kilometers per hour, 17,500 miles per hour. So it circles the planet roughly 16 times every day. Now let's talk about an amazing astronaut named Sunita Williams. She has done some really cool things in space and her story is super inspiring. So let's dive in. Who is Sunita Williams? Sunita Lynn Williams was born on September 1965 in a place called Euclid, Ohio in the United States, but she likes to call another town called Needham her hometown. Her dad, Deepak Pandya, comes from India and her mother, Ursuline Boni, has roots in Slovenia, which is a country in Europe. Sunita has two elder siblings, a brother named Jay and a sister named Deena. Sunita's education and early life. Sunita went to Needham High School and finished school in 1983. After that, she went to the United States Naval Academy, where she learned all about science and got her degree in physical science. Joining the Navy and flying high after her studies, Sunita joined the US Navy in 1987 and became an officer. She learned how to dive and then became a helicopter pilot. She flew a special kind of helicopter called the H-46 Seek Knight. Sunita even helped people during big events like Hurricane Andrew and was part of important missions like Operation Desert Shield. In 1998, while she was working on a ship called USS Saipan, she got selected by NASA to become an astronaut. This was a big moment in her life because it meant she would soon get to go to space. Sunita becoming an astronaut, Williams completed an MS in engineering management from the Florida Institute of Technology in Melbourne in 1995 and she entered astronaut training in 1998. Sunita started her astronaut training at the Johnson Space Center in Texas. She traveled to Moscow, where she received training in robotics and other ISS operational technologies while working with the Russian Federal Space Agency, Roscosmos, and with crews preparing for expeditions to the ISS. After years of training, she finally went to the space for the first time on December 9, 2006, aboard a space shuttle called Discovery. She joined a team of astronauts at the International Space Station ISS, which is like a giant science lab that floats in space. Sunita Williams is not just any astronaut. She's a record breaker. She has spent a total of 411 days in space, which is more than a year. She also did something called spacewalks, where astronauts go outside the spaceship to do work. She spent over 50 hours floating in space, which set a record for women astronauts at that time. One really cool thing Sunita did was run a marathon in space. She ran 26.2 miles on a treadmill in space during the Boston Marathon in 2007. She completed it in 4 hours and 24 minutes, while her fellow astronauts cheered her on and handed her oranges, just like on Earth. In 2012, Sunita became the commander of the International Space Station during Expedition 33. This made her only the second woman to ever lead the ISS. During her time there, she even did a triathlon in space, which included swimming, biking, and running. Of course, swimming in space was a bit different. She used special exercise equipment to do it. After the Space Shuttle Columbia accident in 2003, NASA knew they needed a new plan. President George W. Bush decided it was time to think big. He wanted NASA to build a new spaceship called the Crew Exploration Vehicle that could take astronauts to the moon and also help them travel to the International Space Station ISS. This plan was part of a bigger project called the Constellation Program, which began in 2005. Orion was the name of the new spaceship NASA was working on. It was supposed to replace an older idea, the orbital space plane, which was only for trips to the ISS. But by 2009, NASA realized they didn't have enough money or time to finish the Constellation program on schedule. A special group, the Augustine Commission, told President Obama that the project needed a lot more money or it wouldn't work out. In 2010, NASA decided to cancel the Constellation program. Instead of building everything themselves, they would ask private companies to help them. This way, NASA could still send astronauts to the ISS without relying on Russian spaceships called Soyuz. In 2011, NASA started the Commercial Crew Program (CCP). They asked companies to come up with new spacecraft designs to take astronauts to the ISS. By 2014, NASA had chosen Boeing and SpaceX to build and test their spacecraft. The idea was that these companies would provide a safe way to send astronauts to space and back. Before astronauts could ride on these new spacecraft, they needed to pass several important tests. They tested how the spacecraft would work in emergencies and during real space missions. These tests took longer than expected, so NASA had to keep using the Russian Soyuz until SpaceX Spacecraft Crew Dragon was ready in 2020. On November 16, 2020, SpaceX made history by launching its first full mission with Crew Dragon. The spacecraft went into space on top of a Falcon 9 rocket and later safely splashed down in the ocean near Florida. Boeing was still testing its spacecraft, Starliner, which would land on solid ground in the western United States. To make sure the ISS has always enough astronauts, NASA signed contracts with Boeing and SpaceX. SpaceX will fly 14 missions and Boeing will fly 6. This way, the ISS will have support through 2030. And NASA won't need the Soyuz anymore. In 2015, NASA chose Sunita Williams as one of the 4 astronauts to test new spacecraft. Boeing's Starliner spacecraft has been tested uncrewed for a total of 10 days across 2 separate orbital flight tests (OFTs). The first orbital flight test was a partial failure in December 2019. The second orbital flight test launched on May 19, 2022 and lasted 6 days. The Starliner docked with the International Space Station ISS on May 21, 2022 and remained there for 4 days before undocking and landing at the White Sands Missile Range on May 25, 2022. Sunita Williams was actively involved in the space program during the later part of her career, particularly with the Commercial Crew program. In 2022, Sunita Williams was picked for an important mission, the first test flight of Boeing's Starliner with a crew on board. The mission launched on June 5, 2024, with Barry Wilmore as the commander and Sunita Williams as the pilot. A day after launch, Starliner successfully docked at the ISS. The plan was for the mission to last about 1 week. Before Boeing's Starliner spacecraft was launched, several problems were identified. First, helium leak. A small leak in the propulsion system was found on the launch pad, but NASA considered it a low risk and allowed the launch. Second, thruster design issue. A design flaw in the thrusters was discovered that could affect the capsule's re-entry if enough thrusters failed. Third, software problems. The spacecraft's software had sometimes failed during development. The part of the spacecraft with the helium system and thrusters burns up in the atmosphere. So, any issues with these systems can be studied on Earth. However, during the flight to the ISS, 5 thrusters on the Starliner failed. The NASA found leaks in its propulsion system. NASA has decided that it's too dangerous to bring astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sunita Williams back to Earth right away. So the Starliner spacecraft will return to Earth without them. Staying on the ISS, Wilmore and Williams have been staying on International Space Station ISS and was working with the Expedition 71/72 crew till now. They will be starting back by 19th March 2025 Wednesday by the Dragon spacecraft of SpaceX with 2 other crew members. NASA and Boeing safely returned the uncrewed Starliner spacecraft following its landing at 10:01 p.m. MDT on September 6th at White Sands Space Harbor in New Mexico, concluding a 3-month flight test to the International Space Station. Right now, SpaceX is the only American company that can send astronauts to the ISS. Although there's a SpaceX capsule already at the ISS, it's reserved for 4 astronauts who have been living there since March. They are supposed to return to the Earth in September. The next SpaceX mission, planned for September, was originally supposed to carry 4 astronauts, but now it will carry only 2 so that there will be space for Wilmore and Williams to come back in 19th March 2025. By the time, Sunita might be in the top 12 astronauts for most time spent in space. Sunita's adventures in space are just a part of her amazing journey. She took items to space that celebrated her Indian and Slovenian heritage, like a samosa, a tasty Indian snack, and a special Slovenian sausage. Her love for exploring and connecting with her roots makes her story even more special. Why Sunita Williams is so inspiring. Sunita Williams shows us that with hard working, dedication, and a love for adventure, you can achieve incredible things, even going to space. She is an inspiration, not just because of her records, but because she proves that anyone, no matter where they come from, they can reach for the stars. So, what do you think about Sunita Williams? Isn't her story just out of this world? Remember, if you dream big and work hard, maybe one day you can become an astronaut too. Thank you for watching, and we'll meet you again with yet another interesting information. Don't forget to like and subscribe our channel to encourage us, and hit the bell button for more awesome, interesting news and updates. Thank you for watching, and we'll meet you again with yet another interesting information.